Hi, I'm Juliana McMillan-Wilhoit, and I am so thankful that you are participating in the Community Map Challenge. Today, I'm going to be talking about our prompt for today, Day 17, Sports. So we think that mapping sports is something that's really important and that helps mark a community. So there's lots of different ways that you can go about mapping sports. So you could do something like mapping the major professional sports teams in a community. This map here is an example of a map that I made using SafeGraph data, which is a data set that uses cell phone data. And with that, I mapped for the Chicago sports teams, and I mapped like the number of devices in every census block group, the number that went to sporting events. And so that was a way to look at affinity within the city of Chicago for different sports teams. So that is just like one option where you're mapping and saying like this is like the affinity for these particular sports. But other options are that you can, right, because sports can be both like this idea of like building an affinity for a team, or it can also be something like building an affinity within individuals and learning things like teamwork and just like building camaraderie together. So we talked before when we talked about parks that there's an opportunity where you could map something like where are the sports fields? So if I want to play tennis in my community, where all do I have to go? And more than just like putting that on a map, you could add things like how far does one have to go? So add some buffers around that, and look at areas that are maybe beyond half a mile away, because that's sort of like at least in the U.S., the reasonable distance that people are willing to walk to get to those facilities. You could also say you have a kid who is playing sports or you play sports. You could also just like put a phone on them, or like take your phone and your watch with a GPS and just also like map like their individual movements during a sports game. I think that would be super interesting to see. Ken Fields, who works for Esri, has done some really interesting maps recently using his cell phone data and his walking of his dog during COVID. Slightly different. When I went camping recently, I kept my GPS on my watch and for most of the time, and I mapped like my movement around our campsite, which it wasn't totally precise, but it was just really interesting, and you could like see from that GPS data like where the tent was, where the food was, because I kept going to those areas. So that is something that you could map as well. Again, there's all sorts of different ways that you can creatively map sports. But the reason why we include sports, again, in being a thriving city is that it helps build that camaraderie and bringing people together.